I am Bethany, the Artist and Label Services Manager at Horus Music, and today I'm joined by the lovely Gabrielknowseverything.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank you for coming in.
Oh yeah, of course.
So I've got a few questions that I wanted to ask you just about your life, your career, and what you've got planned for 2025.
Sure.
So the first thing, what inspired you to start writing music?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Okay, so I've always loved music. I've always loved singing. And it just sort of, well, I went to an art school when I was younger, and it never really manifested into songwriting until I started getting introduced to guys who really inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
Like early influences, Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, early Drake, stuff that really was sort of genre bending, different kinds of indie music as well, where, you know, it's like bits of R&B, bits of hip hop, bits of pop, all sort of mixed into one, and just very creative. Hearing that, and especially Frank Ocean, I was like, oh, I want to do that. Like, I want to make music like that. So yeah, that was a little bit of the start. And then, you know, you practice, you get better, and stuff like that. So eventually the vision comes into fruition, but I think it starts off with that initial inspiration.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And speaking of the start, when did you actually start making music? How long ago?
So let me see. So I'll say like that inspiration period takes place like 2012, 2011. I started performing like as a singer-songwriter 2015. I think the first time I ever went to a studio was 2016. And then, so I think my first release song was 2016. It may have been late 2015, but that 2015, 2016.
So nearing a 10-year anniversary soon then.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Some new releases coming up.
Maybe something special in the works for that.
Oh, definitely.
So the music that you currently write and put out there, how would you describe that? Your current sound in 2024?
So I guess I've really lived up to that genre bending inspiration. I call it alternative and sometimes indie, but it will go back and forth. I love playing guitar, so that's a constant influence. But I mean, there's so many pieces of amazing music that I'm inspired by. It's hard to just be like, oh, I want to make only a hip hop, or I want to make only R&B, or only indie, only alternative, you know, only folk. So what ends up coming out is just sort of a mix of each of those, which is hard sometimes with marketing, but you know, I prefer to follow the inspiration, I guess.
Yeah, and see where it just takes you, I guess.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And in 2025, with your plans, are we following the same theme of going to be a mash of different genres?
Yes, 100%. 2 albums planned. Am I allowed to say that?
Nice,
Yeah,
yes.
2 albums planned.
Exclusive?
Yes, exclusives. One will be more indie, alternative, guitar-based, acoustic guitar, a little bit, some harmonies and stuff like that. And then another will be an instrumental album, some kind of lo-fi, jazzy stuff.
Nice. And your songwriting process, tell me a little bit about that. Do you have a set way that you work, or does it depend on who you're working with?
It used to be a lot more, you know, okay, I'm going to write a song a day. We're going to do this, and eventually
That's quite tough, a song a day.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. And it leads to a lot of bad songs.
Yeah.
And in the past year or so, I've just let them come to me a little bit more, and it's been very natural. It's not nearly, it doesn't feel as prolific, but, you know, end up with, I've got like 4, besides the 2 that are coming out next year, I've got 3 or 4 in the works. So over time, you know, and if you keep working on these ideas, as they develop, the music just keeps coming. So I think sometimes with artists, there's a little bit of an anxiety that once a project is done, you know, what's next? What am I going to do next? But you know, if you stay in touch with the music, find your inspiration, I think inspiration finds you as well.
And then I guess it feels more natural and authentic in a way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you feel, like, I don't know if it's like cliche to feel like, it's like channeling some kind of energy, but that's how it feels. It feels more like you become a medium for this feeling, and it may be like a collective feeling, like something that's going on in society at large, or something that you're dealing with right then, and you just need to get that off your chest. And it turns into a song, and you listen back, and it, after that feeling is gone, or whatever you're dealing with is gone, you're like, wow, like I wrote this. So it can be very humbling in a way, but it's definitely like, channeling a sort of energy, as cliche as it sounds.
That actually leads me to ask, so your works that you create, are they from your own personal experiences?
So, I think mostly my personal experiences. There's some, and it's really hard to write, because Beatles are a big influence of mine as well.
Okay.
And I think in the past, and when they talk about their songs, it's always like, I think they have a hard time figuring out what the song means. Where initially it'll feel very personal, and then as time goes on, you look back, it's like, oh, this may have a different meaning. Oh, this applies to this, or this applies to that. But they always start from a very personal place. And I think over time they take on different kind of dimensions, depending on what's going on. Or the lyrics could be like very mirror-like, they'll reflect what you're going through at any given point in time, even if that's like one specific thing, and then as time goes on, it's another specific thing. So it'll start from the personal place, and then over time become universal.
Okay. As well as music, which we love, you also have a label.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the grocery store?
Yeah, so the grocery store started in 2018 with myself and a few other independent artists, looking to create sort of this idea of a store with different artists available in the store, and different kind of sounds and textures, sound textures available for people, as if they could just peruse a store and find like different kinds of records and stuff like that. So our mission statement is to promote fresh and organic artistry for independent artists, and we really try to uplift artists in a way to allow them the opportunity to share their music and gain a larger audience in a more organic way than just being like, okay, this, and it, or you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And it started with my team and I's struggle to sort of get the music off the ground from the get-go, because there are so many predatory people in the music industry that, I start my first songs are 2015, 2016, and we started coming together collectively in 2018. It took those 3 to 4 years of trying to figure out what to do, to where eventually we're like, we're just going to sort of help each other.
I've had the pleasure of working with some of your amazing artists through editorial campaigns and on artist and label services. And they're very varied in terms of genre or story and artistry. So can you tell us a little bit about the artists that you've got on your roster at the moment?
Oh yeah, of course. Myself, Gabrielknowseverything. We have one of our initial artists, Rossatown, rapper. Half of You he will do reggaeton and R&B. Theophilus, rapper. Jimmy, a producer. He'll organize a lot of the engineering on our tracks. Graph Beats, also known as 87, producer. Some of our newer artists, Ashley Sage, R&B, pop. Jesse Wynn, R&B, hip-hop. Arawa, Afrobeats, R&B. we've also worked with a few others, Ian Wex, sort of alternative funk, R&B, and Paisho, jazzy R&B. So there's definitely a wide range of sounds there, but it's that independent-minded. It's organic. It's the kind of music that sort of like organic food. It's very holistic, good for the soul.
Love that connection and the branding and how that all fits in.
Oh, yeah.
And your role within the grocery store, what is that? So how do you help other artists to kind of start making music and putting it out there when they might be completely new to the industry?
It's really just, a very artist-centric perspective and understanding, or trying to understand what, they're looking for with a release and how to get it out to people in the best way. Sort of like connecting the dots. And in some aspects that is, just putting people in touch with their collaborating with one another, or helping to uplift like a specific community. I think my role is really just trying to empower artists to not make the same mistakes that we did when we started off, and giving them that platform to where you start off on the right foot. It's a lot easier than if you trust in this company. It's like, oh no, they did this weird kind of promotional thing. Now we have to sort of circle back to square one and build this up, build the branding up, etc. Where if you do get that nice start, and with some of that comes editorial pitching, then there's a really solid foundation to continue to move forward, to find shows, find merchandise, and then develop that community around the artist.
It can make a difference, because if an artist has a negative start,
right.
And they deal with maybe companies that don't fulfill them or fulfill their needs as an artist, it could put some people off of continuing the artist journey.
And we see that. I've seen that all the time. People 100% that I had the pleasure of starting out with in Orlando, Florida, where TGS first started. And if people just keep running into these walls, eventually they're going to get frustrated. And that's completely natural, right? And people have their lives to live. And it's not necessarily an intuitive thing to, release content and release music, figure out organic ways for that to reach an audience. Because you do want the music to reach an audience. You want to find that community. And it's sad, because there's so many talented artists that I had the chance to start with who aren't making music in the same way because they ran into those difficulties, or something in their lives happened that sort of compounded difficulties they were facing as an artist. And in the back of your head, you see these folks on the radio, and you see these people who are reaching massive success. You're like, man, like somebody back home, like, oh, not to say that they're better, but it's like, oh man, they're just as good, but they just didn't get the chance to find their audience.
Yeah.
So it's definitely sort of like a sad, sad inspiration behind it. But I guess that's what keeps us going.
But it's amazing that you're using your own experiences, whether they're negative or positive, to help the next generation of artists as well, so they don't have to start off on the back foot.
Yeah.
So you can be as vague as you want to be here, but can you share some of the obstacles that you have faced as an independent artist?
I guess getting your foot in the door for shows at first, especially if there are specific curators. I started off with like R&B, hip hop stuff. So not necessarily through a band. Like live instruments are always more intuitive as far as getting gigs and stuff like that. But and eventually I did start playing guitar. But if you're looking for like specific showcases and shows, getting your foot in the door can be especially difficult in establishing that connection. So sometimes even just starting off with a show, which is where you're going to generate a lot of support and excitement for your music to start, can be extremely difficult. One of the first things we did, and it's how we sort of started the community feel, was we just did it ourselves. We found really divey spots that were in a sketchy part of town, and charged very little at the door, and we were able to bring a few of these artists up and throw our own show. And obviously, the first few go okay, and then you get a little bit more of a hang of it until you're like, okay, if we want to really highlight artists, if we want to pack it out, we know how to do this, this, and this. And sometimes just giving newer independent artists that opportunity will really fan the flames in a way that otherwise takes a little bit more effort to get going. Because you also think, like, for that kind of stuff, if they go out to a show and there happens to be a producer there, or there happens to be a photographer there, happens to be somebody taking video, well, right there to start, that's like that's a team right there. That's a photographer, a videographer, you have content, other people are sharing your music to help you get it out to people in your corner who see that others believe in you. They're more likely to believe in you as well. So throwing our own shows. Distribution was difficult. Finding Horus music was excellent towards that end, because a lot of people go towards DistroKid, and nothing against DistroKid, but it's just so big that it's hard to get a personable feel as an independent artist who may not have a team around them. And then promoting music, different kind of avenues. There are all kinds of weird, shady companies in SoundCloud that'll repost to an organic audience, and then you get all these weird comments on your songs. Okay, is this going to look bad for the future? So knowing how to promote your music in a way that is like, okay, avoid this because this is not going to look good later on. And then from there you continue to release music in good faith, do shows in good faith, and start a nice little, like forest fire, keep fanning the flames the right way.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess networking is
Yes.
so key, because you can meet people that you can collaborate with, and then you can still be independent, but suddenly you've got your team that you can work with, which
Definitely.
is amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's and everybody's got their own network, and to sort of collaboratively leverage a community. And when that happens, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
it can go overseas, which is amazing. There's no
Exactly.
restrictions.
Yeah, I was started making music in home studios in 2015, and almost 10 years later, I'm here in Leicester in the UK, meeting with you fine folks. So yeah, you can go a lot of places.
Yeah.
For sure.
And in terms of artistry, so a lot of artists have this big dream that they want to get signed, but you do hear a lot of stories by like major labels, that kind of thing, of
Right.
artists getting shelved, or maybe their creative direction doesn't go the way that the artist wants. So what would you say the advantages are to remaining independent as an artist?
So I guess, excuse me, a lot of that's sort of like the dream that's sold, and for a lot of younger artists, it's this idea that I'll release a song, it'll become popular, and then a label will find me, and then that label will give me an advance of millions of dollars, and then my dreams will be fulfilled, and then that'll be the rest of my life, right? But it leaves out a lot, and it leaves a lot to the imagination, where I think you see nowadays some of the bigger, really more famous artists are having a hard time with dealing with what comes from, like, this exchange where people feel like they own a stake in who you are to a certain extent. Like Chappell Roan has spoken out about that recently.
I've seen that on TikTok.
Yeah, which I know has been very enlightening. And then you see things like with this Drake and Kendrick beef, like how many things are getting aired out, true or not, like, is everybody willing to deal with that? I think there's a lot to be said about being independent and sort of engaging with a creative lifestyle in perpetuity, to where you have the freedom to continue to release music, You're not necessarily boxed in. You can continue to perform shows. You know, I think there's this idea that it's music and releasing music is just for when you're younger, and I think that it's a beautiful thing to see artists who continue to sort of manifest that in a number of ways, and it could be in hip-hop. There's a really inspiring, and I'll give a shout-out here, inspiring movement that was from Orlando, inspired TGS a lot. Colors of the Culture via Thanks Joey and Nico Is through Talib Kweli, where they still release music to this day, and they curate such a colorful aesthetic of like different kinds of cultures within their music and different collaborators, and you see that, wow, you know, there's something to be said about having the freedom to move in this industry as creatively as you like and not be beholden to any kind of expectations, financial or otherwise, because you don't necessarily, I mean, you don't need funding just through a label. You can, you know, find funding yourself in any kind of number of ways, even if it is through your own 9-to-5, and continue to make music in the way you want to. And I think it's a lot more fulfilling that way.
It is tough if an artist is starting out and they've got this idea in their head like, I want to get signed by a major, I want to get £1 million, I want to do this, I want to do that. But the reality is you can make it as an independent artist and have multiple revenue streams and do multiple creative things and control your own creativity at the same time, which is priceless.
It's really priceless, right? Because I mean, and you hear about the really bad situations where, you know, an artist is stuck in a 360 deal, and it's not necessarily that every artist is in that kind of, you know, locked in situation, but it can be just as tough to feel locked into a specific persona of yourself, you know, that you feel like you have to live up to. And you see even mid-tier acts struggle with how to break away from this idea of their identity. And I think it has a lot of ramifications, you know. It can develop very organically in a number of beautiful ways if you allow it that freedom.
The grocery store has been with our global artists and label services model for a little while now. So how have you found the experience?
We found it fantastic. I know I mentioned earlier, and again, nothing against DistroKid because it's a fantastic way to start out, but it's so big that it's really hard to find like a personal way in relation to the music. I say specifically with Horus, finding editorial contacts for DSPs that we didn't even know about ahead of time. Like when I first released and the first album I pushed through Horus was a lo-fi album. We had some editorial placements on Boomplay, which blew me away because, you know, you think, wow, people in Africa are listening to my music right now. And then that opens up a whole new field of different kinds of networking opportunities and contacts around the world. So it's been fantastic. We've had, I think up to this point, I've had a few Apple Music placements. Some of our artists have had Tidal placements. Mm-hmm. More recently, Arawa and Ashley Sage, I mentioned earlier, had some excellent placements of Apple Music as well. Yeah. AudioMac. So it's been really helpful to have you guys sort of assisting and supplementing on that end. And then Horus and Anara has helped out with connecting with other artists from around the world, which otherwise is, not to say that it's impossible, but it's a lot more difficult when you're doing it on your own. So just having you guys as a team has been very, very helpful and true to the vision, you know, of working independently and collaboratively within these different community spaces.
Really glad of that, and honestly something we pride ourselves on is being there for our artists and being able to communicate in person, which obviously, you know, it's not always the case with a distributor. Oh, yeah. And it shows with these different placements as well. Music truly has no borders. You can reach different territories, different fans. So it's been amazing to see your grocery store artists and how they've kind of progressed with each release.
Oh yeah, and music, like Without Borders, is such a great way to put it, you know. And I think like that's how it should be, you know, especially in this digital age where we can't have access to something that's from across the world. There's no reason to limit ourselves. So any kind of way that we can continue to operate within that sort of freedom of creativity and that Without Borders space is just great for the artistry, you know, at its core.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You also work with our sister company, Anara.
Yes.
So that's on the publishing side of things. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about your journey with them so far.
So I through TGS, I believe half of you are reggaeton artists, and primarily Spanish speaking in this music. He signed with Anara back maybe late 2020, if not 2021, early 2021, and that sort of got our foot in the door to where we were able to submit more music. And by late 2021, I was able to sign a deal with Anara, and through Anara, like I said earlier, we've had the chance to develop more collaborative opportunities with other songwriters around the world. One thing I've really personally enjoyed are the virtual songwriting camps that Anara puts together, and publishing will have us working with briefs, right? So, and that may be for like a specific company or like a commercial, and typically there'll be several briefs through these songwriting camps that the team in Anara will set up with, I would say, like maybe 2 or 3 different groups with like a producer, maybe a top liner, and then just, you know, a songwriter, an instrumentalist, and we'll get on Zoom calls, all these different time zones. Like I think I had the chance to work with 2 artists from, maybe it was 3 artists from India.
Oh wow!
In my first one,
Yeah.
and like they just blew me away. They're so talented, you know, and there's no way I would get the chance to get on a Zoom. Well, I mean, you know, I'm sure I could, but like just having it supplemented through Anara in such a organic way was brilliant. Like we were coming up with riffs, and you know, I'm playing a little bit of a riff on a guitar, and then one of the other songwriters, he's like, oh yeah, and then we could have this. And he's just playing this most beautiful riff. And I almost got up. I was like, okay. I was like, maybe that's it for me. But you know, we come up with these ideas for these riffs and these collaborative opportunities. So Nara has been really excellent towards that, like network development and challenging as a songwriter in different kinds of ways. And some of the briefs that we've had the chance to work with. Like recently, it's been more K-pop oriented, which has been a really lovely muscle to flex songwriting-wise. Being like, okay, I'm gonna listen to these references and focus specifically on this kind of sound or this kind of style, and then sort of see what comes from it.
And with the briefs, how does that usually work? Is there a specific turnaround time?
So it depends. It depends on. There's some that are like you have like a day. And it's obviously like, okay, you know, you're scrambling a little bit.
Yeah.
What do I have? What do I have? Can I cook something up? You know, I'm texting my collaborators. I'm like, can we do this? Can we do this? You know, and they're like, we're at work, you know, or something like that. Or I'll bother them. I've had them, they've gotten a little bit, you know, for more of the quicker turnaround stuff, they've gotten a little bit more conciliatory. They're like, okay, like, I'll be like, hey, I know this is annoying, but I'm going to text you an hour before the deadline to send that instrumental over. And they're like, okay, you know, I'll set an alarm. I'll text like 5 minutes before the alarm. I'm like, hey, this is the lead up before the alarm text. So sometimes really quick turnaround for the briefs. Sometimes a weekend, which can be nice. You'll get like a day or two to track. You spend maybe like a Friday and a Saturday tracking, and then Sunday sort of touch everything up. And it depends. Sometimes the briefs call for a demo, which is a little bit lighter, and sometimes the briefs are looking for more of more of a fully fleshed out sound. And sometimes you'll have like a month to work on a few. So I guess it depends on what they're looking for, and what kind of deadlines the back end is calling
Big
for.
question now.
Okay.
So with your own songs, which is your personal favorite that you've released so far, and why?
Oh my gosh, whoa. Oh man, personal favorite song. What have I just released? I released Strange Places last year, and Summer 17. So I'm very like an album-based artist. And if it is an album, and obviously, I'll sort of go back and forth between genres, like in kind of marginal ways. I really enjoy approaching an album like as a concept. Like my most recent Summer 17 is like primarily R&B, kind of slower, a little bit more production oriented. I did really enjoy, and it changes. It's hard to be like, oh, this is my favorite song forever.
Depends on the mood, I guess. How you're feeling at the time.
Right. I really like, I'd say right now, it's from that Summer 17. It's close to me.
Okay.
It's the second to last, no, it's the third to last track. So it's track 8. It's a 10-track album. And it's a very like classic R&B kind of sound. Like I wish I could sort of help to visualize the drums a little bit, but very D'Angelo influenced, very guitar oriented. Like I was able to lay down the guitar tracking in the background. Sort of like the vocal styling comes in that way. That's like that passionate R&B. I was able to bring a little bit of a falsetto when we added some strings in there. I think that's close to me right now. Right now,
it could change.
It could change. Yes, it's likely to change. But right now, I'd say close to me is probably a favorite.
And what was the writing process like for Close to Me?
That one was very quick. Sometimes it's just like it's there. I just have to like grasp it and write it down. Sometimes it's like agonizing. Like sometimes it just takes like a year. There's some songs where I can freestyle it a little bit. I'll have the chords, I'll have the drums, and I won't write the lyrics until a day before I record them, just because I don't want it set in stone. I think for that one, that specifically, I wrote the chords. I produced a reference instrumental for 87 who would create the final. He would add the final drums, and he would mix the guitar down, and he mixed the bass as well. So I tracked the guitar, I tracked the bass, and created a reference for the drums. And then I just sort of created a melody line. And the next day, leaving work, I just wrote the lyrics as I was walking out of the car. And I told myself, I'm going to change these. And then when I went to track them that night, I was like, you know what? These actually aren't as bad as I thought. You're in a different kind of space when you can sit down and sort of marinate on them. I recorded them, and initial tracking, I think I added maybe an extra vocal line on the hook, but it felt like it was right. It felt like I didn't want to add too much either. Sometimes that's, I think, for vocalists especially, because I started off as just a vocalist, and then I learned guitar and bass later on in production a little bit. I think for vocalists, you'd want to add too many layers. At least that was my issue to start. So it felt great with just like the 1 or 2 layers, and we kept sort of sitting on it and on production. 87 and I, producer, and I think this is it. And then, but it didn't really. I mean, it evolved mix wise. We kept touching up EQ, compression, reverb, and stuff like that, little by little. But initial tracking, initial layering was like, okay, I think this is good in the lyrics. So that one came about pretty quickly. I want to say that was like a span of a week or so. Yeah, I know. I'll keep adding on to the story. Like,
it sounds pretty natural, the process as well. Like that story was ready for you to put into song form.
Yes.
And less is more sometimes, I guess. So
100%, 100%. And it was we were at a point where like, okay, we feel like this album needs like one or two more songs. And I was like, all right, let's try this out. There were a few other ideas, like things that didn't necessarily fit, that we kept coming back to and just couldn't get it quite right. But this one, in contrast, was like, we laid it out and it's like, oh, this feels good, actually. And the more natural it is, I think the better.
And if you know, you know. If it feels right, then just, trust your gut. Yeah,
it's a little bit of learned patience with that, because I would say to start, and I would encourage like all artists who are just getting into it to trust their intuition, because you can be as like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do this as you want, but if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel natural, then it probably won't ever, feel natural once it's out either. So you definitely want to try and manifest that feeling as much as possible from the beginning, right? And trust in the process a little bit.
That actually leads on perfectly to my next question, because obviously you have a wealth of experience, not only in your own artistry journey, but also with the record label.
Right.
So for someone who is just starting out and who has no music out there yet, what advice would you give them?
So, I mean, and definitely building off the previous one, trust your intuition, 100%. And it's so easy to get caught up in this, I call it like the rat race on social media. Like, don't feel like you're in competition, with other people. It's all this sort of illusory thing that it's not conducive to what you're trying to do, which is the music, So trust your intuition and have faith in the process. Have faith in those who you meet. Because there are some people who you meet initially who they may not seem like they're inclined towards artistry or music in any way, but those may be your biggest support in a community eventually, whether or not they eventually start making their own music because they're inspired in some kind of way, or they start making their own art, or they just have ideas that add on to yours. I think there's this idea, especially with this idea of networking, that it has to be like transactional, and it doesn't, like, you say like that saying like vibes don't lie, like it can be just getting a good vibe from somebody and being friends with them. Being nice to people is very important. Like, as like it's like it goes without saying, just be nice to people. There's a book by Stephen King on writing. Stephen King's like a horror writer, right? Where he was talking about a story, like somebody who was a talented writer, but they were just a jerk to people. And they published a book, and he didn't promote it because he remembered that they weren't like necessarily friendly. And he said that people, they won't always remember your work, but they'll always remember how you treated them.
For sure, yeah.
So regardless of who it is, what kind of sound they have, how much experience they have, just try and be good to people,
Yeah, it's like they say, be nice to people on the way up, because you never know who you're going to meet on the way down.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. And that's just the best way to build a community, because if it is this kind of community, and I've been a part of these initially, like a community where everybody's just, it's like, okay, it's going to be very competitive based and we're all going to make it. Those don't last very long, because as soon as somebody gets another opportunity, then, poof, like that initial kind of community is gone. And you realize, okay, like people will use you as sort of like a step up or a ladder in different kinds of scenarios, So trust your gut, trust your intuition for who people are, and the community will sort of naturally build itself.
So what are your plans for 2025?
So to 2025, I know, did I mention 2 albums? I don't know if I mention that specifically. But yeah, so 2 albums, an indie and an alternative one, very guitar based. That will be out in April with 2 singles leading up to it in March. And then I have an instrumental album planned for maybe September, late August, somewhere around that time. Definitely going to continue working on music. I've got, like I said, a few albums, so continuously touching up those. So those will be ready for 2026. And looking to get a few shows in New York City, Brooklyn area. So just in the process of setting those up right now. And then obviously, continue with shows, as many shows as possible.
And what about the grocery store? What's the plans for 2025? Anything that you can share with us?
So definitely some more shows, pushing further and further out. We were able to have our first in Brooklyn last July. So continuing to expand on that, getting some more of our artists within those spaces to continue to allow for the opportunity for collaboration to flourish. I say that's we want to keep it under wraps a little bit, but definitely more shows and continuing to build on stuff farther and further out.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. It's been lovely to have you here in the UK.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And it's been great to kind of talk about upcoming plans, and it all sounds very exciting. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's been a great time. I'm slowly getting up on my UK slang.
Yeah.
So hopefully I have that down.
I could teach you some of that. Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. You can find me on Instagram, everywhere pretty much, at Gabrielknowseverything, YouTube, at Gabrielknowseverything, Spotify, Apple Music, all streaming platforms, Gabrielknowseverything, and yeah, I'm in those places.